Hey, this is Tim Clark with the End Times Matrix News, and we're coming to you live today. We're going to start off this show with MARKARIAN 421 is the title of the show. Right now we're going to highlight Chris's her box so that we can have her do a brief slideshow, and then Anthony's going to jump right in on top of it, and we'll get going with that. So we're going to highlight Chris, and go ahead with your slideshow.
Okay. Okay. You guys see that?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. All right. We've been lucky to have Anthony Patch join us. He's such a big part of our show and a blessing and a friend in Christ. I'll tell you what, he has special knowledge of CERN, and we've been able to collaborate a lot of information and get a much better understanding of CERN and from the physics standpoint, spiritual standpoint, and from ancient history. So we've got a lot to share today and to collaborate on. I wanted to say too that I did a video to announce this show called "The Most Dangerous Machine Ever," the Destroyer, and I have quotes in the Bible from there on that video. And there's a lot of ancient deities showing that they are the destroyer. I wasn't calling CERN Apollyon or Shiva. However, the mechanics involved in CERN, they are that of Shiva and Kali, Thoth, Hathor, and this is all connected with what we'll be talking about today. CERN even admits their goal is to create the Big Bang, to recreate it. They're looking for parallel dimensions. And we're not going to see all of their fallen angel technology, but we can look at ancient history. We can compare CERN with the ancient occult agenda. So, you know, they do everything by the cosmic clock down to the occult numbers and dates. And they use ancient gods and goddesses for all their projects and planet names on all of their devices. So these CERN colliders, they're pretty much all over the world. It started out the Wi-Fi and internet connections, and the supercomputer is a part of this too. So we're going to be, you know, talking about CERN, the quantum computer, and the ancient technology. So what I wanted to start out with today was, you know, there is a black hole in the Milky Way, and we've had shows about the Milky Way before. The Milky Way and what title of the show, MARKARIAN 421, is a lot alike. And we've connected so many dots, we're going to have to do another show to kind of put everything together. But we just kind of came across these things, and now it's like opened up a whole nother big window for us. And so we'll be doing another show connecting a lot more of these dots. But the Milky Way, these are some pictures. Some of them are reanimated, but from the Milky Way, and explaining how the sun will rotate around this. There's like millions of stars rotating around this object that they found to be the black hole of the Milky Way. And the Gemini twins are like the rulers of this. They're the pillars of heaven, and we're going to go into a lot of connections with that on our next show too. But just keep in mind that these Gemini twins have a lot to do with this too. Sagittarius is the eye that located in the eye of the Milky Way galaxy. It's ruled by the planet Jupiter. So this Sagittarius also has a lot to do with the connections with the black hole. We had a show before called the Nile. Well, it's about the Milky Way and the Rainbow Bridge and the City in the Sky and the Spiral Galaxy. And we showed how the boat of Ra would go across this Milky Way. And we do have some dates coming up, September the 24th, and that coincides with this equinox that started in March and ends in September, when CERN starts up the same day and the Pope addresses Congress. This is the same exact time frame that they did it during a certain alignment back in Egypt. There's another picture of the cow, which is Rhea, and Nut, Hathor, Isis represents the Milky Way, and that's how the boat of Ra would sail upon it. It's like a ladder in the sky that goes up to the dog star Sirius.
That's where they get the roller coaster ride from, the tracks
Yeah.
to go through the sky.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the clock in the sky, I mean, it's been there for so many thousands of years. When you talk about Adam and Eve supposedly being created in around 4004 BC, that's a long time ago. I mean, there's been a lot of changes in the galaxy. The Milky, and in the Milky Way where Gemini was, it used to be ruled by Capricorn. I mean, everything's changed, and that's why the symbolism is different, the gods are different, and things have changed over time. But we're going to be able to explain all of that in another show to kind of break all of that down. But today on this Markarian 21, it's a blazer located in the constellation Ursa Major. And it looks a lot like the hole in the Milky Way galaxy.
And I first heard about the Markarian 421 from Anthony's Covert Catastrophe book. Very interesting, and I'm sure he'll elaborate on that, but go right ahead.
Yeah, the plow, we've talked about this before. It is also the constellation of the Big Dipper. It represents the Alpha and Omega. Here's Cain with a Phoenician letter A. That's another huge connection we'll be talking about at the 33rd degree in our other show with Phoenicia and the roots of that. But we just touch on this real quick, just showing that this constellation is called the Plow. These letters together, the Alpha, Aleph, and the Tav, and these two letters in Hebrew mean plowshares together. They mean a lot of things. I mean, I could list probably 100 different translations that it means. So here's a picture of Ursa Major, and it is connected here with this leader, which is Arcturus. He's also known as Enlil. We've gone over that too in one of our shows. It's the zenith star of the Hawaiian Islands. Here it is again, Ursa Major, the plow. It's another picture just showing Arcturus. Here's a hymn from Samaria, and this is another part of our show that we're going to do on the electric universe with a Thunderbolt project. But here's a hymn with for Enlil. And this is Mars, Saturn, and Venus. And this was part of a cataclysmic event a long time ago. And this is part of the Thunderbolts project. Picture, this is a symbol of Inanna. And like I said, we'll get into that in a different show. But there's a lot of verses that talk about the Pleiades, Orion's belt. You can translate these words in the Bible to Saturn and Mars for the true meaning. And it talks about the Mazzaroth, and which is the zodiac in Job 38:32, and it talks about Arcturus that we just discussed. So the Bible talks about Orion, Arcturus, the Pleiades. It talks about all of these things in the Bible. And there's a lot of connections with those things too. Saturn is mentioned, the star of Renphen, the star of Solomon, which is Saturn. The Bible talks about Chuan, and Renphen, which is Satan, which is tied to Saturn. And unfortunately, Solomon built temples to these demons. And we're going to break that down too in our show. All of that's going to come together now. Here's a little article on Markarian 421's flare-up that it had. Here's a picture. It's called a blazer, and I'm sure Anthony in a minute will help me explain this black hole. So here's some pictures. So we showed pictures of the Milky Way above here, and these are other pictures here. And then down here, we're looking at the Markarian 421. This picture looks real familiar, doesn't it, Tim, where the obelisk goes in the center?
Oh, yeah.
And
Definitely
Anthony, don't that look familiar?
has a beam coming right through there.
Sure does.
Yeah, that beam is very interesting there, but we had this in our video too.
There goes Switzerland. Oh, sorry.
Ghostbusters.
You're right. You're right.
So here's another one where it's showing this with the center here, kind of like the Vatican where the obelisk goes into the center with the two circles. And here's another example. And some other interesting things, Anthony sent me some pictures and I said, oh, that looks just like my picture. I have a picture of the Z-pinch high energy plasma discharge seen in the ancient skies as an owl. I think that a lot of these frequencies and things in the sky make a lot of these pictures of the gods and a lot of, their ancient pictures and cave drawings and things like that.
Yeah, I think the Thunderbolts project does a great job of illustrating the fact that a lot of what people have considered to be gods or entities were actually the shapes of plasma discharges in the heavens when the planets were in different positions. And this Z-pinch is excellent because that's the alignment of Venus and Saturn and Mars to the Earth with the plasma connection, which is a Z-pinch in quantum physics. But the owl, you know what? When you first presented this to me in that video, this owl is Bohemian Grove in California, next to San Francisco. Yeah. Because they worship the owl god in the Bohemian Grove.
Yeah, that's Moloch. That's one of the temples that Solomon built. He built a temple to Moloch and 3 other gods. So there's 4 total, and the 4 we've talked about how the 4 and the 4 equal the 8. So the cross as the 4, we've discussed that, how it makes a pyramid, and the 8, and that's who they worship. That's why they wear all the little crosses. The Celtics wear the cross, the Knights of Malta, the Queen of England, the Pope, all of them wear the little crosses on them. And so we're going to get into detail on that on another show because it's going to be quite interesting when we really bust all of that down with the symbolism and everything. There's going to be no denying how that connects with Solomon's temple and all of these things. There's so many dots that we've connected. It's just going to be amazing. But I really wanted to focus on this Markarian today because I was just fascinated with the connections of how it connects with this Ursa Major, which is the plow share, and it ties into the Hebrew language and all of these things. But this is a picture Anthony sent me, and that made me think of the other picture that I showed with the Z-pinch. And it looks just like the picture that I sent him pictures back and said, wow, that looks just like the picture you sent me.
That's like the owl.
Hootie and the small owl off to the right, too.
That's right.
And this is part of the CERN machine.
Yeah, those are the beam lines. That's inside the main ring.
From the eyes, huh?
Yep.
It's interesting. Yeah, I guess the way that we would find this out is you would look at stellarium, the alignments, and then you would have to have the plasma discharges to have the shapes, but we can't get the plasma discharge of the alignments off of stellarium to have these shapes, like the owl shape and all that, but real neat.
Now here's another picture of the Z-pinch. It looks just like that. Someone put a link in our show about the skull with the thing coming down looking like the dig symbol, but this is another picture, and here are some drawings. This is the Arab Emirates, and it looks just like that. It's another one with the 2 dots.
Yep.
And then here's another one. Anthony sent a lot of pictures to me, and here's one of the pictures he sent with this current, this Birkeland current. it looks exactly, and it's also here in the cosmos here. This current looks just like this Egyptian word for eternity. And here's the symbol for the sun. And here's part of Ptah's name, which they call him the creator god. And we've explained that before, how he's the resurrection of Saturn with these 4 deities that are actually 8. There's 2 combined for each one, and they connect to the planets in the celestial realm. So that we'll put it in our next show too, to kind of put everything together in perspective. But
yeah, so it just makes me think that I look at that picture and I go, is this what Jacob's ladder is, with the angels climbing the Birkeland currents? It's like
it is.
It's a very interesting kind of thing.
It is Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Does this part of like the Milky Way, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a photograph taken by the Hubble Space Telescope, and these occur throughout the universe. These are not just specific to any one set of planets or anything, but that's exactly what will be established between the southern pole of Saturn and the Large Hadron Collider. Will be that what I've called the helical plasma conduit, otherwise known as a Birkeland current.
Right. And that's, it's very evident that Saturn is the main god that they worship. I mean, they have it, if you read the Bible and read about Dagon and the pillars, and you look at the Pope's hats and they look like fishes and Dagon, and then they have the sun scepters that they kiss and carry around, and and they kiss the Quran, and that's tied into all of this too, because Islam is a big factor hidden into all of this. I mean, a lot of the presidents have a lot of hats that say Islam, and Mecca. It's tied into Saudi Arabia and the oil industry, and so you can find those pictures, and we have them too. But it's just interesting how all of this has kind of been secretive. And so when you get to the 33rd degree and above Masonry, these things are revealed, and there is like a demonic seance that they do during this time when you become one 33rd degree or above, and they select people especially for this. And most of the time, I guess it's part of their bloodlines that do this, and they pick certain people to rule different countries and all of those things. But I guess the point on the 33-degree Mason, and they do these things with NASA. A lot of they are part of the Freemasons and JPL. They started out with these the Aeneid, which is after the Ogdoad, and these 9 gods that they say they communicate in a fourth dimension. And these NASA, some of the people from NASA say that Mecca is the center of the world, where the cube is, the black cube that they worship. And when you look at Saturn going around in a circle on the hexagram, that's the same thing that they're doing when they go around 7 times and they run around in circles around that black cube of Mecca. And the black stone that they run around and kiss is the black. They see it as Yoni and the black matter. And the black stone, they say, came from the star system Rigel. And even Hermes Thoth, Enlil, he's the same person. He even writes in his Emerald Tablets and his Book of the Dead and all. He's written hundreds of thousands of books there, or that's what's been said, in the ancient history. He says that he's from the star system Rigel, and I guess that stone came from that star system. They say that it was something that Adam had at one time and worshipped. I don't believe that, but I know that they twist a lot of things around in these occults to make their God look like the true God, which he's not. But this black stone is in the United Nations building. It's all, if you look up the black cube, it's everywhere, and it represents Saturn. Even the quantum computer, isn't it a black cube, Anthony?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes. It's housed in a black box.
Yeah. So Saturn has a lot to do with their motive for this, and that's what Anthony was saying, that there is going to be a connection to the planet Saturn. I mean, we already have Wi-Fi connection with, it came from CERN, and I'm sure not everybody in the world understands it, but from what I understand, it comes from somewhere else. This Wi-Fi energy connection that we have, that there, there's energy and there's a magnetic field around some of the planets, and so some people say that Saturn is like a computer, and there's some type of communication with that, and I'm not really understanding how all of that works myself, but it's just interesting because where does the internet come from? Does this have to do with the god Janus that opens the doorways? I mean, we have this doorway open into the computer now, and which we didn't have before. And these Z-pinch waves also, they're connected to a machine that's called the Saturn machine that they built, that's tied to Lockheed Martin from 1987. I put the link in the description if people are interested in looking at that, and their Hermes accelerator. So, I mean, even in 1987, all the way up until now, they're naming their leaf detector and Atlas and Alice, and they're naming all of these projects after gods and goddesses. And I know over time they've hid things, but there's people that do some very incredible numerology compared to the so-called mythic gods that they worship, and it's phenomenal. I mean, it's just incredible how they put these numbers together with, the cosmos and NASA and dates and times and the Pope and all of that. So if you look at Matthew Nicholson channel, he has a lot of interesting connections. I mean, there's just no denying it when you look at that.
Yeah, yeah, I call it the occult fingerprints of things that are going on. If you want to see the numerology behind things, just to say that there's no statistical way that can occur the way it's happening. But it's something to just consider related to Saturn and things like that. And we'll let Anthony, I guess, jump off. We'll highlight Anthony's box there. Is that
okay? If you must.
And we'll just get you started with your breaking news on MARKARIAN 421 and what you wanted to present today.
Well, I as a standalone subject of talking about a massive black hole, which is what MARKARIAN 421 represents, it wouldn't be very interesting without Chris's research. And it actually blows me away. Again, I say this all the time. I was talking to some guys in Scotland a couple of days ago, and we talk about blowing our minds. They call it their brains falling out of their skull and scooping them up in a bucket. And of course, that's with a nice, thick Scottish accent. But what a great group of guys. Anyway, the point is, all of this is just really coming into clarity for the three of us, and I hope our audience is tracking with us on this. A little bit of history on the books. Tim, you mentioned Covert Catastrophe, my first book. The germination for the writing of that book took place when I ran across a scientific article regarding MARKARIAN 421 in April of 2013, on April 13th, as a matter of fact. There were a gathering of physicists who are principally studying black holes, and they gathered in Denver for a conference. And there are no coincidences. The same time that they're holding the meeting, MARKARIAN 421, a massive black hole, suddenly, unexpectedly, erupted in a massive burst of gamma ray energy that was directed towards Earth. Of the Earth-directed gamma ray bursts that have occurred in recorded history, This was the largest, most powerful burst of gamma ray energy ever directed towards Earth. And these guys just happened to be at the right place at the right time to observe this and study it. Which leads me to say they knew that this burst was going to take place. They had indications it was going to, and so they gathered in Denver, and Denver has its own can of worms to talk about. But they gathered for this event. That triggered the starting of the first book that I wrote, and that's how the book opens, with a massive amount of gamma ray energy that is headed towards Earth, and the question is, what's it going to do when it impacts the atmosphere? So I'm going to leap ahead here for you. All of that is factual. That's science. And it turns out that when gamma rays strike our magnetosphere, and to a certain extent our atmosphere, but focusing on the magnetosphere, it forms tiny little black holes, microscopic black holes in the magnetosphere that only last for, a millionth of a second, so to speak. And we have satellites that have been up for many years that have been monitoring these black holes and studying them. And you can think of them as a portal, but they don't last long enough to be of any, actual use, any practical use to us. We recently saw the launching of 4 identical satellites, the MMS, in a diamond pattern into our magnetosphere to monitor black holes. And we know that the magnetosphere is being affected by the magnets every time CERN fires them up, and it changes the shape of the magnetosphere. So what does that have to do with Markarian 421? I don't want to sound too mystical, but this came to me in the middle of the night, woke me up out of a dead sleep a couple of nights ago, and I came to the conclusion that I'm going to backtrack and backfill with. But the conclusion was the Large Hadron Collider is a black hole. The machine itself is the same thing as Markarian 421, but it resides here on Earth as a black hole. And I'll stop there so you can interject, and then I'll backfill on that.
Yeah, that will be shocking, that one comment that you just made, because nobody has been considering it as a black hole. Their fear is that it will open up a black hole. But what you're saying is that is a replication of a black hole here in a machine form.
That's correct.
This beam coming out of 421 is going to be connected to this, is what you're going to go into, I guess. But that's pretty radical to even contemplate that our scientists have created a machine that is a black hole, operates like a black hole.
Yeah, I have not seen that in the journals. It's a conclusion that I've come to simply because of all this research that the 3 of us have been doing, and it's all coalescing into that. So let me define Markarian 421, since the Large Hadron Collider at CERN is supposed to be like that. Let's define it. Markarian 421 is a black hole, and in the picture that Chris put up, it showed these 2 jets of light or energy that are coming out from the black hole. And people say, well, black holes attract light to it. It's an artist's representation of gamma rays that are invisible normally to us, but a representation of gamma rays that are being emitted as a burst of energy from opposing directions from the core of the black hole. And I won't go into the physics of spin rates and angles of momentum that cause these gamma rays to be thrown off, but the point is, picture just one of those rays, one of those jets of gamma rays coming out as a stream from the center of the black hole, and that is headed towards Earth, as it did in April 13th of 2013. That same jet of gamma rays, I would ask you to picture that jet being produced by the Large Hadron Collider and being projected or emitted from the Large Hadron Collider from the surface of the Earth towards the southern pole of Saturn. So you have this jet of energy coming from the machine, the same as the jet of energy that comes from Markarian 421, the black hole. So they studied this Markarian 421 and the gamma ray burst that came from it for the purpose of determining how much energy would the Large Hadron Collider need to generate to create a jet of energy that was sufficient to, number one, open a portal, and number two, to reach out in the form of a helical Birkeland current plasma conduit that would reach to the southern pole of Saturn. And by studying Markarian 421 in 2013, they confirmed that they needed bigger magnets to upgrade the machine to achieve a higher level of power to make this feasible to connect to Saturn. And I'll stop there.
Well, my mind goes directly to all the dead scientists that we've been watching for this past several years that might have had some heads up to what they're doing in the physics world with this creating this machine. Because yes, if you're doing this kind of thing, there would be plenty of people who would want to warn normal people of such a crazy agenda.
So what are you saying about me?
No,
Thanks a lot, Tim. Thank you, Tim.
Well, no, I'm sorry.
No, I wanted to say, Anthony,
No,
that's an incredible.
Now, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that's an incredible connection, because when I've studied the pyramids, and I know that they've taken a lot of equipment out of the pyramids, but when you understand the power inside of the pyramid, it's the same thing as what you're talking about to me, with the energy and kind of like a portal, because the pyramids were kind of like the same thing, like a direct energy weapon, and they could blow beams out from the top of it. And I know that the stones on the top is missing from the pyramid. It's not, and all the insides, the equipment and everything has been taken out of it. But
Right.
When I was looking at a lot of information about portals and the gluons and the gluon factor with that is kind of like the two heads of Janus. It's like they can change colors, they can jump from one to the other, and it's kind of like interesting, because it's like a portal being open from two sides of a dimension from the inside of the pyramids, from what I understand of how they used to function. And I have said this before, that I do believe CERN is like a pyramid with a capstone on it. It is the same thing. And when you look at some very well-known engineers and architects that have done their whole lives work, 30, 40, 50 years work on the how they believe that the pyramids were built, they do the spiral galaxy. And it's amazing, because it's just like the Tower of Babel too, because the Tower of Babel connected the planets together. Solomon built his temples, and according to the cosmos, because I think that what most people, and even myself, didn't understand for the longest time, is that as above is so below. Everything above is just like here. We're kind of like the universe here on Earth, and connected to the cosmos, in my opinion. And I know there was a lot of fallen angel technology that was given to humans many years ago, and there's a lot of mysteries in the world, and there's a lot of rabbit holes that people don't want to go down and don't want to understand. But you have to, in order to understand the pieces of what these occultists are thinking, what they're doing. I mean, CERN, their logo is Saturn, and 666 is Saturn, and that's what their logo is. And once you start understanding all the logos and the numbers and the numerology, just like in Matthew Nicholson's videos, it's phenomenal to know the speed of Saturn, and the connection to that. Round Saturn's Eye does a good video about how Saturn is like a camera from one end to the other. And the pyramid was like that too with the capstone. It was kind of like an eye at the top, like a lens. And that's why the eye is on the top of the pyramid on the dollar bill. And, you know, that's why 1776 is on the dollar bill. And actually, the occultists celebrate May 1st as their god coming out of the abyss. I mean, that's something that they do as well on May 1st, and that's when the Illuminati was founded, was May 1st, 1776. And that's in the Be Ready video that the elite put out.
And it's also
they don't think anybody's going to understand it.
It's also the Age of Ultron movie that's coming out in another couple weeks with the Avengers is May 1st. So this is their transhumanist thing. Yes, right on May 1st, you know.
There you go.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I just want to ask you a question. This shows intention then from a conspiracy, let us say, between humans and something that's telling them to show up at certain places to witness stuff. So go ahead.
So here's the next thing that in that whole thing. Okay, we talked about Markarian 421, 2013. They knew the gamma ray burst was going to occur. They gathered and they were ready for it. I believe they know when the next burst is going to take place. Whether it comes from the center of the galaxy or from Markarian 421 again, I don't know at this point, but that's where I'm going with my research right now, is to try to find out what they're anticipating in terms of another gamma ray burst that will take place that will help them when they try to make this connection to Saturn. Now, they may not need the help, and that may be where my research leads, is that they just needed to determine the level of power that was needed by observing Markarian 421, and they're done with that. Now they've got the magnets, now they've got the power capability, now they can do it independent of anything in the galaxy, and that's probably where my research is going to end up. The sense that I have of it right now. But let's go back to the pyramids for a moment. They don't need the pyramids anymore. That's the ancient technology. They don't need the Tower of Babel anymore. The Large Hadron Collider does replace the Tower of Babel, which it was nothing more than what we're seeing at CERN today, but in a different format. The pyramids as well were definitely generating power. Supposedly in the Pharaoh's coffin or stone box where something was removed, whether it was his sarcophagus or a mechanical device, one of the theories is in the center portion, in the burial chamber inside the pyramid, there was the Ark of the Covenant, that apparently the internal dimensions of the stone casket, if you will, match the biblical measurements for the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant was creating electrical energy that was then projected out through the gold capstone of the pyramid. The interior of the pyramid is granite, and granite is slightly radioactive. It's a good conductor of electricity, and it was used to focus the electrical energy from the Ark of the Covenant up through the interior of the pyramid and then emitted through the gold capstone towards the heavens. So it may have been a communication device as well as a directed energy device, but I think it was a communication device between Saturn when it was closer to and in alignment with the planet. Also, the outside of the pyramid, just to round this off, is covered in limestone, which is an excellent insulator. So you have an insulator like a wire covering. You have the power of electricity inside generated by the Ark of the Covenant, which was then taken by Moses out of Egypt And that's why the Pharaoh was chasing after Moses, was to recover the Ark of the Covenant, because within 10 years of the removal of the Ark of the Covenant from the pyramid by Moses, Egypt fell and became basically powerless because it no longer had electricity, which is what operated. And if you look at the Ankh, if you look at some of the scepters that are represented in ancient Egypt that Chris has been showing, one is a transmitter, the other is a receiving antenna. The Ankh, that loop, if you will, with the cross, is a receiver. So they were sending communications as well as electrical power all over the world, including within Egypt, using the Ark of the Covenant and other devices and other pyramids like the Mayan around the world. So that's a snapshot of that. Let me stop. I'll go on a little bit further with this whole thing of the physics. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think that they were like vortexes too. They were able to travel through the vortexes. The pyramids were quite different, I think, back then. I think everything was quite different back then. And the pyramids, they have so much energy that we could have free energy all over the world. We wouldn't have to ever pay for it because they do. You know, the pyramid in Antarctica has, you know, it's full of energy, and so they still have a lot of energy in these pyramids. They might not function the way they used to, but I find it interesting how you mentioned they don't need them anymore because they have CERN. But we have to keep in mind, too, that these colliders are all over the world. They're not just in Switzerland. That's just the main communicator. But they are all over the world now.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that question's come up several times in our discussions before and by people that have sent us comments. And the question typically is, if they have all these other particle accelerators that are like CERN's, but they're smaller, are they going to use them when CERN finally opens this portal? I tend to think not. I think that they are, again, I always call them proof of concept machines. They develop the different parts that are necessary for the larger machine. So they run subsets of experiments, and then that is all sent off to Switzerland, to CERN, for use and incorporation in the larger machine. So I could be completely wrong. I always try to keep an open mind. They could play a role once the portal is open in a support fashion for what is going on in terms of using them as directed energy sources in conjunction with the energy created at CERN.
As far as the Markarian 421, do you think that the alignments back in the Thunderbolt type of setup was different back then, and this beam would come out of these black holes and would connect with Saturn or something else because they were in a different alignment? Or do you I mean, what we have going on here, from my perspective, is a communication in some way with telling people that look at this date for this to happen. And whether that's Alice Bailey's Ascended Masters from the UN, or it's some observations that they've made with space equipment that one of these portals is about to emit something. I don't know. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, you know, we talked about the small planet, the dwarf planet Ceres, and we have what is the name of the satellite that's there? It's not Apollo. It's
one is Dawn. One is Dawn, and one's Cassini, and I forget which one is which.
Yeah, Dawn's the one I'm focusing on, and you know there are two. They look like headlights within one of the craters on this planet or moon, if you will. And I know that the guys at the Thunderbolt Project are putting out some thoughts and conjecture about these two bright lights that are coming from this moon. I think that they're going to reach the conclusion that this is already a form of electric plasma connection between CERN and this moon Ceres. because you remember in our last conversation we were joking about the pool table. And we were talking about bouncing the energy from CERN off of Ceres, and then that finally connecting with the southern pole of Saturn. I think that the Thunderbolt guys aren't saying it, but I think they're going the same direction I am, in that there's already a connection, an electrical connection established between the Large Hadron Collider and the Moon, and that they're communicating with this Moon in the sense of, much like when you take a laser measuring device to measure a room, they're lining things up, they're getting ready, they're checking their alignments, checking their measurements with the Moon by bouncing signals off the Moon, and that's why we're seeing these two, quote, headlights. There are electrical signals that are being bounced off the Moon already, tracking the Moon, aligning all of their equipment in preparation for September. And then they will, once the Moon and Saturn and the Earth are in the right position in September, they will bounce the signal, or the energy, if you will, from the Large Hadron Collider, much like the pool table, off of Ceres, and then make the connection to the southern pole of Saturn.
So so Dawn is basically just a up close camera electrical feedback monitoring device for them to just monitor how it's doing on the surface, the strength of whatever it is they're looking at, the alignments. So it's just it's the finishing piece of the puzzle, because Dawn is supposed to just keep circling. Ceres, from all I know, is just supposed to keep circling it for a year. I think they said a year, wasn't it? And it went into orbit March 18th on the 666 day. So it was one of those things where I'm going, something's up with this particular satellite, and then your connection there is like, that's your final laser lineup on the final ball to ricochet off and hit into the pocket of Saturn, the Saturn pocket.
Right. And look at the name of the satellite, Dawn.
Yeah.
And this is the era of light for the Illuminati.
And the New Age, the New Dawn.
Yada, 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 yada.
Same junk.
So it's ridiculous.
They're ridiculous. We have to put up with them.
If we were making this stuff up, it would be a really stupid movie. But this is their game. This is their thing. By the way, Chris, we were talking about the pool table last time. I was remiss in pointing out we were actually trying to put the 8th ball in the corner pocket. You and your 8. Your 444 and your 8.
Oh, boy.
Okay. Yeah, now she gets it. Sorry. So anyway, I'm being stupid today. I'm a little rummy. But, yeah, I think we've got most of the pieces. We're looking at the finer pieces of this thing now. But there is no doubt in my mind that they learned from the black holes, like Markarian 421, what they needed to build on the planet Earth. They have built a machine that creates the same type of energy that is created in a black hole. It's called synchrotron energy. It's the same energy that is being generated within Saturn. The northern pole, the hexagonal shape that rotates just like they rotate around the black cube at Mecca, that's a synchrotron particle accelerator, rotating particles. It generates energy. That energy is then used to connect, and that creates your, I keep talking about, your plasma conduit. So the energies so above, same as below, they're mimicking Markarian 421 to the nth degree.
So the question comes up, motivation. Now, they don't think that they're just going to die, that they're being useful idiots and that they're doing whoever's instructing them to do these things, they think they're going to become gods or ascend or whatever they're thinking. And we don't think that from the Christian perspective, of course. But then it goes to the next motivation. Are they trying to, with the strangelets and all that, turn this into a neutron star or something? Or what's their motivation if they plan on living? If their plan was to live forever, what's their motivation with Earth?
Well, the way I look at it is they are trying to create a new race of beings, and Earth will be terraformed into a new heaven on earth as defined by Lucifer himself. Lucifer wants to kill God, and he wants to create his own heaven on earth by destroying God's heaven. And is it necessarily going to be a neutron star? No, I don't think so. But their plan, their architecture is for an entirely different planet than what we have right now, for an entirely different race of beings.
And where does the model come from that they are trying to replicate, this new Atlantis? What planet or what story did they get fed that they're trying to replicate? They were trying to replicate something that they think it already existed or has existed. That's what it sounds like to me.
Right. I think Chris can answer it better than I can, but from what I know, looking back into the ancients as a model for the future, which we keep seeing this recurrence in history, the cycles of history, we look back because there's nothing new under the sun according to Scripture. Therefore, let's look to the ancient history as to the answer to your question, and it's the Golden Age. The Golden Age that existed before Babylonian times and Sumerian times is what they're trying to recreate here on Earth. Is it the Garden of Eden as designed by God, as presented by God? Possibly. Maybe they think they'll have their own form. But Chris, you can probably answer it better than I can, because I don't know what the model is. I just will call it whatever it was during the Golden Age.
Yeah, they do want to get back to the Garden of Eden for sure, and he does want to be God, of course, just like in when Satan fell in the garden, and then you have the tree of DNA, which represents a lot of things, but Hermes or Thoth and Enlil is connected to that, and Asherah, and there's a huge connection to that. But I wanted to say first that when we're talking about Sirius, that it is it is pointing to the belt of Orion. Also, it is the star at the top of the ladder of the Milky Way from the Egyptian chart, the Dendera map. So this chart it's supposed to be the soul of Isis, which is the resurrected Osiris. She's part of his being as the resurrection to the underworld, put it that way. Mm-hmm. They're in the underworld. And so Sirius is one of the biggest connections in all of this, and I wanted to say that. I mean, even the logos of NASA with Vesta and Ceres represents Juno, Rhea, and which is the counterpart of Saturn, Kronos, which is also Nut. Nut is the Milky Way, and this is all tied together, you know, with the Gemini twins. It's a lot, but so I just wanted to kind of point that out about Sirius. It plays a huge part in that, in mythology. I mean, in the ancients, I guess Osiris would go up the ladder of the Milky Way to the star Sirius, and then he would be born every day again. That's how they looked at it, because he wasn't able to be in the world anymore. He was resurrected to the underworld with the golden phallus. That's why we see the obelisk all over the world. And interestingly enough, when we're looking at MARKARIAN 421 and the Milky Way black hole, they look just alike, with the rays going out from the center. Some of these pictures look just like the phallus of Osiris. I'm not saying it is, but it's just quite interesting that's what it looks like with the two circles. It's and I know that a lot of their symbolism goes along with these frequencies and these light rays that we don't know about. They hide a lot of these things from us, but I think that they are trying to accomplish something that they were not able to, especially during the time of King Tut, when his coffin caught fire. That was the exact same time that Moses went through the Red Sea, the Exodus. It was the same time frame. I've calculated it 100 times, and it just has to be the same time frame around that time with King Tut.
Jeez.
Yeah, so
That's
just
amazing.
all of it's just kind of interesting. It's a long study when you're studying the Bible and you're studying these deities that people call myth are in the Bible, and so Dagon is in the Bible, and Yahweh that was in the ark is in the Bible, and whether his name was changed or that his correct name, I do know that's the God of the Jewish people, and that's who they worship. And so all of this is connected together. And in our next show, when Tim and I have been working on this show, we'll explain a little bit of all that and how that's connected with the Catholic Church, and there's no denying it, and what the goal is here from the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, the Romans, they call themselves sons of Mars. That was what they called themselves. And when you take a real good look at ancient history with the Phoenicians, they lived on the 33rd degree in Tyre. I guess that's how you say it. But Hiram was a king of Tyre, and he was related to Tubal-Cain. That was his bloodline. And his daughter and wife, or whoever she was, they do all those things, which was a demon named Nama, which was Tubal-Cain's sister. Maybe she manifested another being at that time, but she married Solomon. She turned Solomon to the dark side. She was a demon, and her son ended up ruling after that, and there was a split in the Jewish people at that time, and with the tribe of Judah. And so it's just interesting in history. A lot of people don't know that Solomon built a temple to 4 deities, and these 4 deities represent the Ogdode, and this is very well documented in history. And then actually there's been a lot of people that have said they've used like underground laser rays to be able to see underneath the ground because they're not able to dig and look for Solomon's temple. And they say that it's by the 8-sided temple in Jerusalem, and that its line, if you point the ley line all the way to a specific building in London, it's 1948. And that was when Jerusalem was founded again.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they do everything by this. I mean, everything.
They do.
Oh, yeah. Everything is coded mathematically where they build their buildings. If you look at an aerial view of the White House, you're going to see the owl. And we know that a lot of these presidents were at the Bohemian Grove, and they did a lot of I know Alex Jones has an very old video of hearing the exorcisms there and them screaming out really weird and stuff. And I know that I'm not sure if it's Mackinac Island, but there's an island near Michigan where the FBI found thousands of bones, of children's bones, that's tied to the same organization of the Bohemian Grove. And so, I mean, there's just no denying that there's a lot of things that go on in the occult and what their symbolism mean, the skull and bones, the 322, the head and the legs of Orion, and what they do in those organizations. I mean, it's just unbelievable when you start to open that can of worms and realize what these occult people are doing and all the connections that they have throughout the world and throughout Freemasonry. And Freemasonry, they base everything on, right now, on Solomon's Temple, which was the first temple built to the demons. And so they, Hiram Abiff, they do the little ceremony with him in the coffin, and I think that has a lot to do with what Anthony was talking about with the energy in the coffin. I think that it has the exact same thing to do with Khufu too, because his coffin was granite. They never found him. He wasn't in there, and so no telling where he is. Is he still alive? Heck, I don't know, but he looks just like Buddha in a way. He has that Asian look. He's an Asian, and he was there in Egypt after the flood, and so these three pyramids with Khafre and Khufu and Menkaure, those three represent the three kings and the Orion's belt. So, which is quite interesting when you put all that together. And I'm not saying Khufu's boat was Noah's boat. I don't know for sure. I mean, who knows? Because I do think there was some type of parallel dimension or universe going on. But there was 8 people in Khufu's boat, and there was 8 people in Noah's boat, and I just think that's quite interesting that there was 8 and 8 at the same time. And as a matter of fact, Sirius is roughly 8 times as far from the belt as the belt is wide.
Wow. Wow. See, that's got to be the linchpin to this whole thing, is Ceres. So we need to pay attention to that. I'd like to see some alignments to Ceres by obelisks around the world. Some triangulation, perhaps, is taking place, that these obelisks are pointing to Ceres. Maybe even the pyramids are pointing towards it. That'll give us some time frames as to when the alignment's going to take place with the LHC. If we can use those much like pointers, kind of like a sundial, we might be able to confirm that these things are all pointing towards September, perhaps the 23rd of September. That may be when all this is going to happen.
Do you think that they know? Do you think that they know when these plasma, as we were looking at the owls in the beginning, the plasma images and that happened in the sky? Do you think they know the alignments and which objects are in alignment when these things, these plasma images, happen? They must know. I mean, they must have some idea based off old maps and old, old collections of constellations and this alignment, that, and these planets and that. When these things were drawn,
Yeah, you have to look at the timetable for the building of the machine to answer your question. So when they started building back in about 1954, I think it was, they broke ground for the Large Hadron Collider. They were on a timetable, and so that timetable is in alignment with the cosmos.
Wow. That's just...
Well, put it this way, Tim. Anton Gigal is a French lady. She speaks Arab. She's very unique because she speaks many different languages, and she lives in Egypt, and she's studied the artifacts for a long time and translated a lot of the languages that she says that the Egyptians on their artifacts in the text say they knew 300 years before the flood was going to happen. And that's what according to her research, that's what she says. So that could be very true. I know there's a lot of Egyptologists that they have conflicting information, or we're not going to ever hear the truth about a lot of these things because they've been so hidden by the military and stuff. But
if we gave you a week in the Vatican Library, we know the truth.
Yeah, just let her do it because it blows my mind. Yeah. Hey, to answer your question a little further, Tim, think about the adiabatic quantum computer. There were multiple reasons for developing a new quantum computer, and the primary function of that computer is predictive modeling.
Wow.
So if they're doing predictive modeling, they're using that computer on the cosmos to pinpoint everything that needs to be coordinated.
Wow, that's absolutely what it is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That thing is amazing. That you will find in 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, the second book. He gets into the whole thing with that adiabatic. That's an amazing thing, though, and that's also the thing that's is running CERN for all those interactions. This thing is AI, basically, right? Isn't that
Right.
what we're talking about?
Right now it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Let's go back to the obelisk for a moment, because something triggered when you guys were talking about that. The obelisk that I focused on in Covert Catastrophe was the one that they call Sather Tower. It's the Campanile Tower. It has the bells in it on campus at UC Berkeley. And it sits right below the particle accelerator known as the Advanced Light Source Building. It's the small version circular accelerator like the Large Hadron Collider. And what jumped off the page at me, and give me a moment to lay all this out. For the fun of it, I took a ruler with a Google image and put the straight edge down on the image, lining up the Advanced Light Source Building, the synchrotron particle accelerator, the center point of that circle on the hill over the campus of UC Berkeley, and laid the straight edge to the center point of the Golden Gate Bridge where the cables form a half moon shape. The bottom of that arc, the center point of that arc, lines up perfectly with the center of the synchrotron particle accelerator. Then I looked below the line and found Sather Tower, which is an Egyptian obelisk. Lines up. The point of it is right on the line between the particle accelerator and the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate, of course, and the Silver Gate and all of that stuff. Then I took the line and looked a little beyond out into the bay itself, and Alcatraz Island has a lighthouse on the end of the island, and it lines up perfectly with the obelisk and the particle accelerator and the bridge. Then I took the line and extended it out into the heavens, and it lines up perfectly with Ursa Major, the Big Dipper that you were just talking about, Chris. And that is exactly the point where the gamma ray burst energies coming from Markarian 421 directed at Earth connected. And that's the opening scene in my book.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, that is amazing. That's very interesting.
Don't you love writing a book and then coming to this conclusion after the book's been out for a while?
Yeah, 2 years later. 2 years later.
Isn't this hilarious?
And the obelisk, real quick, the obelisk represents not only all the things you've talked about, the phallic symbol and all of that, but it is also representative of the jet of gamma ray energy that comes out of the black hole and will also come out of the Large Hadron Collider. It represents that jet of energy.
Go ahead, Chris.
Wow. I had to think about that for a minute. What I wanted to point out is, I've been working on this show we're going to have coming up with all these dots, and I noticed that, Saturn used to be called Helios in Greek, and the sun, and they had, in Egypt, they had a temple to Helios, Heliopolis. They had a temple to Saturn in one of their first temples in Egypt. And so their temple had two giant obelisks, and you see it in the Freemasonries with the two obelisks. One has the sun on it, and one has the moon on it, which are the two eyes. The center obelisk adds up to the same letters as Yahweh. It's 26, and that's the 13th pillar in the center, and we'll go over that more in our next show. But on these two pillars, they are representative of a god in the center and a doorway, like an opening of a portal. That's what it represents. And the Freemasons, they have like a ladder going up, and the Sirius star is at the top. Just like, the Egyptians map. I mean, that's where they get all their stuff from anyway. You can look at their websites. They have Isis on it, and the Egyptian goddesses and the magic squares of the sun. They even admit it. They have a lot of Aleister Crowley's information on the Freemasonry websites and stuff.
Well, all of that points to the portal. All of that is the alignments of those images to the portal opening.
Yeah, and I know that we're working on this too with the four sons of Horus being connected to the plow and Ursa Major. That's why I was just floored when I realized that your MARKARIAN 421 was connected to Ursa Major. I was like, wow, this is incredible stuff here.
And it's a perfect representation of the overhead view of the Washington Monument and the two circles interconnected. That's right. The image that he just talked about, MARKARIAN 421. The light image is the Washington Monument coming through those two overlaps. They know this, and I, I'm going, gee, I don't think they had a telescope that could actually see that 100 years ago. So where is this information coming from?
Does this? But one of my question was if Heliopolis and the obelisk are together, there's two, but Washington only has one. So is there like a connection with Washington's obelisk and the Vatican? Is there some kind of, or is there some obelisk that's in between CERN that connect with each other with the sun and the moon, which I guess Saturn, they looked at Saturn as Helios and Apollo, a long time ago in ancient history. So there has to be two obelisks that are pointing to some sort of moon and Saturn.
Okay, here's your homework assignment. If we go by threes being sacred, and triangulation is how you develop a location through coordinates like GPS, let's take Berkeley as your third one. You've got Washington, you've got the Vatican. Let's look at Berkeley. And the reason I want to say Berkeley is not just because of my own egotistical ridiculousness, but Bohemian Grove is in Santa Rosa, which is about an hour drive north of Berkeley. You have the Golden Gate Bridge, you have the things I've talked about at Berkeley, you have the Transamerica Pyramid Building in San Francisco on the waterfront. You also have the Masonic Auditorium, which its address is 1111 California Avenue. Okay? You also have all of the major players in the semiconductor world, the high-tech world, in the Silicon Valley, just south of San Francisco, south of Berkeley, about an hour's drive, including the location where they manufacture the adiabatic quantum computer, where Google is headquartered, where Lockheed does all of its work. You have everything in the Bay Area. Tim, we talked about Star Trek, and the headquarters for Star Trek for the Federation is in San Francisco.
Right.
All of this stuff is for a reason. So I would say that the third in the triangulation has got to be San Francisco. Has to be. Look at the occult nature of the Bay Area. It's got to be the third point that then gives us the triangulation for a coordinate.
That's also where the Starship crashed right back into the Federation headquarters right there. So
right.
That's another weird spin-off that, of course, the Grok's been talking about forever, something crashing. But that's another spin-off. But, yeah, so I think you just, how many books did we just write in this one show? Like, you could write about 70 books here, on different tangents here.
For sure.
Crazy amount of material.
But I would ask Chris to look at the Bay Area from an aerial perspective, like you've done with Washington and the Vatican. I know the Grox has done some stuff on that as well, but he hasn't gone into the detail like we have.
Right.
He's not aware. We need to pull him into the group. He's not aware of the things that we're talking about. So, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say I watched this video and I didn't think anything of it, and it was talking about the gluons. And they did this. It was from a scientific community, and they did this video with these two robot-type people, and they were talking about dark matter and things that are visible with the eye and not visible with the eye. and they were talking about how you can't see dark matter, and then one of the robots said, unless you're in San Francisco.
Oh!
Really? Oh, I gotta
my
see
God.
that. I gotta see
Oh.
that.
You have to send me that. That
We'll
is
have to
perfect.
link it. We have to link it to the show.
Oh, that is sweet. Oh, okay, my
That's
brain fell
wild.
out on the floor and I'm picking them up with a bucket.
There you go. From the Kev Baker show. There you go.
Yeah.
Scooping
Oh.
it off the ground.
Oh, that's too funny.
That's wild. Wow.
There's so much going on in the Bay Area that, I mean, you look at the politics of the Bay Area. Oh, man. And I grew up there. Kev Baker was talking to me about that. He said, man, there's some reason that you were born and raised in the Bay Area. And I'm not pumping myself up. I'm just saying the Lord just took me with his sense of humor and just like a marble and dropped me down into that pool and said, here you go, boy. This is where it's happening.
It is just like Daniel sitting in the middle of Babylon. He's the only guy sitting there watching everything going around him going, this is crazy. You know, and I'm going to keep praying to God. And all this stuff is going around him.
All right, so you mentioned Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel had to deal with the lions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My fraternity at Berkeley, Sigma Alpha Epsilon, our mascot, 2 lions on the front lawn of the fraternity house.
Interesting. You know, the 2 lions.
More connections.
That Sybil represents the 2 lions, and we know that Orion, like Hercules as Orion, killed the Leo, which was Hera's brother, which is Juno.
Which is the movie Lion King here. Wow.
Sybil has a key, which is a lightning bolt. And I know the Thunderbolts does a lot of interesting things about the lightning and Zeus and the lightning bolt and how that ties in with everything. But so Janice has a key, and so does Sybil. They both have a key.
Wow.
And it's a lightning bolt, because when you look at her hand, that's what she has in her hand, is a lightning bolt.
And that's what CERN's going to generate.
Yeah, we've been teasing people for about 3 weeks about that Janice show.
Well, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's the point. It just keeps blowing up into this massive amount of stuff.
It's going to be good, because Janice does connect with this. It's unbelievable, because it goes along in ancient history, 4 faces, 3 faces, and 2 faces. It's a very complex thing. But, you know, Brahma had 4 faces, and Bendejet in Egypt had 4 faces, and this represents the 4 souls, which is the 4 souls of Horus, and that is tied into the Ursa Major, and the 4 directions, and 4 elements. And so that's just interesting, you know, that the Pope is looking for the 5th element, which is spirit, a spirit element. I mean, we have the Holy Spirit. We don't need any other kind of spirit or demonic spirit or anything like that. They want power. That's what they want. They want money, and they want power. I'm sure the chair that the Pope sits in could feed 1 million people, you know, whatever that golden chair that he has, and he carries the golden wand with the sun. And actually in Mecca, inside of the black square, is a sun on the wall.
That's too much.
I really enjoy it when you come on, Anthony, because you just bring tons of stuff, and then it just starts. We have a pool table bouncing the ball around here, and things just get going. But that Sirius thing is unreal, and the Markarian thing's unreal. Those spots could actually be them lining up the shots, you know, with the connections. That would be unreal. But we got tons of stuff, you know. Go ahead.
I'm waiting for Thunderbolts Project to come out independently on their own and produce in their newsletter that same conclusion. Not that I'm anything special. I'm just saying I think the Lord is leading the 3 of us to all this information, and I don't know if the Thunderbolts guys are believers or not, but I think that they're working through to the same thing that the Lord's leading me to right now. So, interesting side note, one of the gentlemen that's in the Thunderbolts project, they just found out from a friend of mine here in town, actually lives here in Portland, one of the scientists.
Wow.
He's just a few miles down the road from me. So we're
Have
going
him
to try
come
to
down to the
connect.
Clyde Baker. Have him come sit in with you and him and Clyde Baker show.
Yeah, Clyde
Lewis.
Lewis. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Clyde Lewis.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
A
They
baby.
got Kev Baker and Clyde Lewis.
Yeah.
I combined
That's what
them.
we're going to try to
And
do.
Janice, I made them Janice. I combined
That's okay. You got 4 faces. I can see them right now.
Oh man, you are busy. So, what's your next show that you're? Did you hear anything from Coast to Coast yet, or anything like that? I mean, you're stirring the pot, you know. So it's like, well, we'll hold off on that.
Yeah, I'm just following where the Lord leads me. I'm not going after anybody. I'm not promoting myself. I'm not seeking any opportunities. All I'm doing is just letting Him talk to the people that He wants me to talk to, and take it as it comes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for today. That was just mind-blowing as usual. And, you know, the Lord did show me this week when I was reading that in the end time show, He's going to reveal the mysteries, you know, and that I said thank you, you know, thank you for allowing us to be part of it, to see the mysteries being revealed, because we wanted to see, and they're being revealed right in front of us. And, you know, nothing shall be hidden. And it's like, wow. This is like, this is crazy.
Well, you know, His sense of humor, He says, you asked for it, here it comes.
You didn't know about all this stuff.
Now it's coming at us like a fire hose.
Oh, yeah, we can't, we don't have the time to even research or process this stuff. It's just is on the overload, right? It's just to see the information going out there to everybody in the Christian community, getting the CERN angle now, and that the mainstream media is still trying to keep a lid on it as much as they can. You know, outside of talking about the God particle, they really just skip the whole thing if they can. And I haven't seen too much of any mention about. I don't think we will either. But
you know, that's a really good point. I know we're kind of pressed for time, but I wanted to echo what you're saying, because they are colliding particles now at low levels, but they are really keeping a tight lip on what's going on. And I think part of it is because there are a lot of Christians like ourselves that are posing those questions in the alternative media about what is going on at CERN. And so they're only going to talk in, I call them superlatives, or just very thinly veiled things. They talked about last week, oh, we're going to look for supersymmetry. Well, excuse me, supersymmetry is a theory that's been around since Einstein, and they've been looking for it forever. And supersymmetry is nothing more than, in a quantum state, you have a particle here that you affect, and it has the same effect in another dimension across the cosmos, if you will. But it's an identical particle, theoretically, that is larger and heavier than a particle in this existence that is affected simultaneously by you doing something to a particle here. It has to do with quantum entanglement and stuff like that. And that's a whole other discussion. Point is, they're talking about, you know, they were talking about God particles for the last couple of years. Now they're talking about interdimensions, and they're kind of pushing the dimensional thing down under the covers again by saying, oh, we're looking for supersymmetry, because nobody's going to understand what supersymmetry is. It sounds soft. It sounds okay. We're not talking about black holes, and we're certainly not talking about strangelets. I'm speaking for CERN. They'll talk about spirit particle, and they'll talk about supersymmetry, and they'll never tell us about what's going on with the particle collisions, the powers derived, and the particles that they're generating, which are strangelets. They're not going to talk about any of that stuff. So people have asked me, what can we expect to see or hear during this year as the power ramps up in different levels? Earthquakes, volcanoes, changes in the magnetosphere, perhaps more Norway spirals. We're going to start seeing more of the strange sounds in the atmosphere that we've been hearing, and certainly more animal die-offs. So all of those things are going to be ramping up right along with what they're doing.
Yeah, we're seeing major biblical prophecy being fulfilled in front of us. Things making sense now. Even talking about the stars falling out of the sky makes more sense to me now. If you're in the middle of a wormhole, kind of a, if you're just, I mean, if the thing rolls up, well, you know, the stars rolls up. You start getting it more with these portals opening, and you just get this dark space, dark matter thing with nothing there.
Tearing of the veil.
Yeah, tearing of the veil, and this prophetic stuff just makes a lot more sense now. With these images, and
I think,
that tells you we're in the end times.
I think on September, when CERN does that mega voltage, I think there's going to be a huge earthquake. And another reason I think that is because usually during the equinoxes, there's some type of earthquake or something, and we've seen more and more earthquakes happen, more and more, and larger earthquakes happen. And I think that that's one of the reasons. And so, I mean, we hear a lot of things going on in sounds and booms connected around, but we don't have an explanation for it. But, you know, if you look at the equinoxes in history and the sun, and the refractions of the sun and the nuclear weapons that they use too, you can tell that there has been earthquakes on certain days. That was that guy, what's that guy you ordered his book, Tim? The
Occult Physics website, he talked about the ancient pyramid systems, that we wanted to look at the old physics. And so he has a lot of topics in there.
Yeah, Keith Hunter has a real good angle on the earthquakes and the pyramids and the equinoxes and how all that works. He has actually someone that has helped him with a computer and all of those things, like an astronomer. But he has some real interesting stuff. He was on Project Camelot. If somebody wants to check out Keith Hunter, he's got some cool information.
Well, if we could have the stellarium hookups with the alignments plus the plasma discharges, if somebody knew how to, of course, that's the adiabatic computers that Anthony's talking about, you know. But you could, if we knew the the discharge patterns to go with stellarium, you could see different things, and that would be interesting. But that's for another show, you know. We already wrote about 70 books for this show. It's a crazy amount of information. It's like you said, the fire hose. And this is drinking from the fire hose, and it takes a lot to digest this kind of material. And we've been privileged that God's allowed us to participate in this since we've gotten together. That we've had a lot of fun going down this big rabbit hole, which is basically we're at the point now where we call CERN a black hole machine. It's a machine that is a black hole, and that should pretty much terrify most of humanity, and it should motivate people to get saved. It's the main thing. I mean, if you want to, the forces we're dealing with and the people who are the spirits that are driving these people to make a black hole machine, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, well, the Pope or the Vatican will be looking through his Lucifer telescope and his infrared, and he'll be looking for that to happen, or, you know, for sure. And
wow.
So it'll be interesting. September will definitely be interesting with all that power. It's amazing.
I hope we still have the internet and that we're able to talk. You know, that's my other concern is are we even going to be able to talk before this thing happens? You know.
Yeah.
But that's just we just appreciate you coming on today, Anthony, spending all this time with us. We know you're busy, and we really love these talks, and I'm sure everybody watching on YouTube right now is giving it a thumbs up, real excited about these things and sharing with their friends so they can be in the know what's going on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Anthony. Thank you so much. It's a blessing to have you here and as a friend, too.
Well, you guys are my close friends, and this is where I put all my energy, is into our show, the three of us getting together. All my research is always tied and focused into what we talk about here each week.
But we will steal the line about scooping the brains off the ground from the Kevin Baker show. That's well, that's what it feels like today. So, thank you very much for being with us today, and we got about 50 other shows to do. So, everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.